Hello everybody, I am Tadashi Mori. Now let's start the second part of how to create your own origami. And click here if you still haven't watched the first part. In this video here I will show the steps I took to create this origami Charizard. It took me 3 months to make this origami, so it's not easy at all. So do not be frustrated, it really requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, but the result can get really nice. This is the origami. It is a high complex origami, and as you can see you have the details like the tongue, small fangs, eyes, so it's completely different from the previous versions. Okay, so let's start. For this origami I started with the head, because it was going to be the most complicated part. And I started by making 4 equidistant points like this. Well, let's understand why I did this. So I wanted to make the head with more details than the previous one, because I think it's the most important part for you to recognize it as a Charizard. I started by finding how many tips I needed along the middle line. I need 1 for the top part of the mouth, 1 for the tongue, 1 for the bottom part of the mouth. So you obviously need 1, 2, 3 tips, but you need a 4th one to make the eye. And that's one of the details I added for this origami, because instead of making the eye using remaining paper, I dedicated 1 tip only to make the eyes, so I could work on making it more similar to the original one. Alright, that makes 4 tips along the middle line. This line here would be the diagonal of the paper, and along the diagonal I placed 4 points. As you can see, they are all equidistant. It means that every tip is going to have the same length, and that works really well. As you can see, everything has about the same size, and you have many techniques to make the tips along the middle line. This one is just one of them. Now let me show you what this means. So you have 1, 2, 3 lines and 1 point. That's going to be the tips I will use to make the face of the origami. The first line here is going to be the first tip. Now I just pull here the second line like this. Do the same thing here on the next line, and the same thing here for the last line. So you have here 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Now fold here the side of the paper, the side of the top part up to the middle line, and do the same thing here on the other side. Unfold both sides. As you can see, the way we folded before, all the layers are locked together. So we have to make this same fold, but inside reversing each layer. It's going to be something like this. You have to fold here this first layer to inside like this. Now carefully do the same thing here along the next layer, always being careful so that you don't lock 2 layers together. And in the end, the origami should look like this. And now you can see all the tips free from each other. Now do the same thing here on the other side. And in the end, the model will look like this. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 tips. Of course, this is just one technique, and you leave several parallel lines. And depending on the origami, it may not be the best way. Anyway, the 4 tips are the eyes, the top part of the mouth, the tongue, and the bottom part of the mouth. Now we have to make the ears. And as you can see, the ear is close to the eye and the top part of the mouth, and the length is about the same. Now you may say that the distance between the ear and the eye and the top part of the mouth is the same as the distance between the bottom part of the mouth and the ear. But it's wrong, because you don't have any layer between the ear and the eye or the top part of the mouth. Now you have several layers here. Basically, if you made the ear close to the bottom part of the mouth, you would have to fold it upward over all these layers, and it would be really hard to shape. It is key for you to think about paper distribution. So here is going to be the eye, right? And here is going to be the top part of the mouth. But the eye is not only the tip of the paper, you need to separate the surrounding area. The same thing goes for the top part of the mouth and for every tip you make. This area we separate is the circle packing. Now the ear is going to be here, because the area you have to separate here is the same as the other parts. And that will make it have the same size. Of course you could place it any other place, like here or here, but I can say that any experienced artist wouldn't place it any place like this, because that would leave a gap of unused paper and you would have to hide it later. Alright, so if this is going to be a tip, you need more lines coming from this point. Now a small part of theory. I know that this kind of fold will not lie flat. Just by looking at it, I know that there's something wrong. Of course it requires some experience for this, but let's understand the theory. First of all, you have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. And you should always have an even number of lines, unless it's on the side of the paper, which this point is not. But even if I made, let's say, one more fold here, it wouldn't be possible, because this angle plus this one and this one is not equal this one plus this one plus this one here. You can see that one of them is bigger than the other. But again, this is just theory, so you don't have to remember this all the time. But after some practice you will see that this is wrong just by looking at it. And the advantage of memorizing how the folds works is that you can correct it directly here on the crease pattern. This line here goes to this direction, removing this line, and I have to make a new line here. But wait, do not get frustrated yet, there is another way to get to this result. We know that I want to make the ear here and here, right? Now you have to find these points on the paper. So this point here is going to be here, and this one is going to be here. Now keep in mind that if I want to make this place here become another tip, I gotta make more lines come from this point. So we have one fold here, and this fold in the crease pattern will be this line. So we already have this line, that's why we already have the fold. Now we are going to make another fold here. So try to make a fold along this line. As you can see, I'm just placing here the fold, and we can see what are the natural consequences of this. Here you can see that there's a new fold forming here naturally, and this is just one of the consequences I said you would have in the crease pattern. But still, this is not enough because our goal here is to make the model lie flat. So I have to pull this tip all the way upward so that the consequence folds are always multiple of 45 degrees. And in this model you can see that all the lines are always aligning with another line. You can see that there's one fold missing here, right? So let's make this fold, and again, see the consequences of this fold. And it's quite obvious that there's one line here, but we don't know how to make the remaining parts. So let's find out what's the best way to fold it. I will always try to align every fold with another lines, like this one, for a single reason. I don't want irregular folds like this. I want folds in multiple of 45 degrees. Like this. At least in the beginning, I want consistent folds so it's easier to organize. Let's make this fold aligning with this other line here. Fold here, the obvious consequences. And here, let's align this fold with the middle line. And when I do this, you can see that the consequence is a fold that goes all the way to the end of the paper, like this. And in the crease pattern, it would be this line here. And the same goes for this direction. Up to this point, I made everything directly on the crease pattern, and the biggest advantage of that is that you don't waste time folding the paper. It doesn't seem like much, but that's because we know that this is the successful version. But when you fail 10-20 times, it gets really tiresome to fold the paper several times and have to throw all the papers away. So I recommend you to always see the crease pattern of the origamis you make, so you can read the crease pattern as musicians can read sheet music. At this point, after cleaning all the folds, the crease pattern for this origami should look like this. I've already set all the important points for this origami, but you can still see that it's a little bit thick, so I still gotta narrow it. The front part is quite easy. I just have to open the flaps, like when you make the frog base. So as you can see, it's quite direct to narrow the front layer. Now just do the same thing here on the other side. And the front layer is done. Now the other layers are going to be harder. But still, you just have to use one technique. Like this, you have to fold all the layers toward the middle. Then I have to find out how to sync fold all the layers. And sync folding is one of the basic techniques, one of the essential techniques you must know for you to narrow complex origamis. And in this case, I am sync folding here the front flap first. Now you can see the result of this front flap being narrowed. But still, you can see that I didn't narrow the other layers. So let's sync fold and see the result. I know I'm making the folds a little bit fast, but if you want to learn how to make the origami, go to the tutorial by clicking on the link in the video description, or just click on the Charizard picture right now. So, after I finish making the sync fold, the model will look like this. All the layers are narrowed. This is just a basic sync fold, so if you didn't understand it, you should practice more of all the techniques you use in origami, because for you to create origami, you must know all the possibilities. So obviously, if you want to create a complex origami, you must know how to fold a complex origami. Okay, now let's do the same thing here on the other side. And I finished narrowing all the layers. But still, you can see this big layer here, this big flap, getting in the way. So I would have to make this fold, but the consequences are too big. So for now, let's leave it like this and see how the other folds are going to be. On the crease pattern, sync folds will look like this. They just make parallel folds, kind of dividing the other ones. This part here is the small sync folds. And the other layer was this part here. And the folds are going to look like this. If it gets too confusing, just unfold the paper so you can make the crease pattern. On the front layers, I didn't make sync folds. I just opened the layers, and the crease pattern should look like this. Now I just have to narrow each layer a little bit more, making folds like this. And in the crease pattern, it would be small triangles. And at this point, we finally finished making the general shape of the head. Now let's see what are the consequences of these folds. And this should be the result. By folding the head, we made big consequences on the remaining parts. And we have to work with these consequences. And that's the reason it's not easy when someone says, well, just make this origami with bigger horns or bigger mouth or anything like this, because everything you change in one part have consequences in the whole paper. The next step would be to find out how to make the claws, the arms, And the most important part is finding the proportions and finding out how to make the distance between the head, going through the neck, and then the arms and the claws. Again, this will look like a coincidence, but it's not. The perfect distance between the head and the claws is this one here. But it's not a coincidence at all, as I spent over 3 months to find out this proportion, and in the previous video you could see some of those tries. To make the claws, we are going to do the same technique as we used in the beginning. So we will make 3 points and make 3 claws. To make the claws, I needed a few more parallel folds like this. So I made these parallel folds up to the end of the paper. Now just make these small squares. Now let's see this distance on the paper. It would be this part here. So it's from this point up to this point. And with this we are going to make the neck and the arms. So here the neck and the arms. And at the end of the arms I need to make 3 claws. And this is one of those parts that it's way easier to work on the crease pattern than on the paper. As you can see, the paper here has a confusing shape, so it's not intuitive at all to work with this. It has too many layers and the layers has this weird shape. And in the crease pattern it was kind of more obvious to see what was the best way to make the claws. Now let's fix the consequences of this fold. Here there's a missing line to this direction. The reason is simple, the claw is a tip, so we need more lines coming from this point. And also, here on the jaw, you need more lines coming from this point. Now we still have to work on these squares, making lines, something like this or maybe like this. You know, there are several ways to work on this part, and we will see which way I chose. And before we go on, how do we make these folds here on the paper? And unfortunately, at this point you will have to unfold the whole origami. After you unfold, it gets way easier to see where the folds should be. So let's just make the remaining folds. This is the end of the second video. The link for the third video is in the video description. Please do not forget to click on the like button in this video and to subscribe in my channel. Also, give me your feedback so I know if I should keep making this kind of videos. So, thanks for watching, see you, bye bye.